Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and I hope you can see me. Can you please confirm, Catherine?
Yes, I can see you. I can hear you.
We are going to talk about the ultimate sin today, or that's what we always think when we live in a community scheme. The sin committed by the trustee and the director. Conflict of interest in community schemes. Can't I contract with my very body corporate or the HOA that I reside in? And I'm an executive. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're going to talk about today. My name is still Jolene Wasserman. I'm still the head of community schemes and compliance here at Van Deventer, Delluth and Marks Attorneys. We are in Sandton, Morningside. I am going to switch off my camera because I do not want to see myself. I want you to look at my slides. Please post your comments, questions, queries in the chat box. As usual, I'm going to collate everything, send it together with the presentation and the questions and answers with the relevant case law or the legislation to you directly after this. We're doing it on Zoom from now on. It's far better than the ting, 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 ting. I've thought it's in my head, but it's not when people join late. So now we don't get to hear the ting, ting, ting when people join late. So you can only focus on the ultimate sin that we are going to discuss today. Are you ready? Let's go. And I'm full mode. I'm going to give you a scenario. Please meet our first conflicted trustee. He owns a company, Greenscape Gardens Pty Limited. The body corporate pays Mr. Greenscape 18,000 Rand a month to look after the common property gardens. Now, here's the part that matters, ladies and gentlemen. He proposed not only the appointment, he voted for Greenscape's Gardens appointment. And every month, he approves his very own interest. Now, remember, he's a trustee and he owns Greenscape Gardens Pty Limited. Now, ask yourself this question and be honest with yourself. Is this lawful? Or has the trustee already breached his duty? Most boards get it wrong, in fact. In both directions, some say, of course, it's fine. He's just helping out. Others say, that's obviously illegal. The honest answer surprises all of us. It's not automatically unlawful to be a trustee or director and to have a company that the community scheme contract with. But we're going to see exactly when it's seriously a breach of your fiduciary duty and when it's not. And this is where we get it wrong in our community schemes at the end of the day. Because we always say, yes, it's okay, or it's just flat out illegal. And that's what we're going to have a look at today. And this is merely an example. So if your company is called Greenscape, I didn't know about it. The fiduciary duty. Everything we talk about today comes back to one idea. Fiduciary duty. And this is the thing I always go back to. People say, oh, that's a scary word. Yes, I must act. I must know everything about everything. Otherwise, I will get sued or be taken to CSOS, and we're going to talk about that later. Fiduciary simply means a position of trust. Every director, trustee, scheme committee member holds the same interest in their hands. And the law says you must put the scheme first as a trustee or director, ladies and gentlemen, and your own interest second. But we don't do that when we're the chair or we're a trustee or we're a director. We think we're just above everybody else in the community scheme. Isn't that so? And this was what the law says. Oh, it says, yes, you must act in good faith. You must act in the scheme's best interest and avoid any clash between your own pocket and your duty. From that flows two specific rules. And they never bend. And I'm going to point that out in my next slide with almost over 100-year-old case law in South Africa that still stands today. So those of you who have been born in 1921, you would have remembered this case. Okay, so what's the rule number 1? No secret profit. And I'm going to elaborate on that in my later slide. You may never quietly make money out of your position. What's the second rule? No self-dealing. You can do business with the scheme, 100%, and I'm going to show you how and when it is legal. So you don't breach your fiduciary duty, but only if you disclose your interest. Step aside and the other trustees must, or the directors execute their voting right. Not you, if it's your company. So let's look at this. It's 2 regimes, 1 fiduciary call. Whether it's a sectional title, whether it's a homeowners association, whether it's a mature lifestyle estate, it's just the different provisions that's applicable. The principle stays the same, ladies and gentlemen. So, Section 8, Sectional Title Schemes Management Act, our fiduciary duties are governed as trustees. And a homeowners association, of course, it's your either your constitution or your memorandum of incorporation, and then there obviously is an added layer. If it's a non-profit company, you have a memorandum of incorporation with the Companies Act. That's also very, very important. And all that it says is, it's like I said, this exact same principle. Loyalty before self-interest. This is what you should do. You can have that company to deal with your own scheme. And this is the court case. It's a very interesting court case. It's still in pounds. Imagine if we could still work in pounds today. Imagine how much money we would all have had. Now, this is a scenario. Robinson versus Randfontein Estates Gold Mining, 1921. What happened? A company chairman bought a farm for £60,000 and quietly bought, if you read the judgment. Then he turned around and sold it to his very own company. Look at that staggering amount for £275,000. So those of you who are good with maths, I'm terrible. He pocketed, or he made a secret profit of £215,000. So what did the judge say in this instance? Judge In said, you must repay every cent, Mr. Robinson, that you made out of this deal. A fiduciary may not make a secret profit and may not let personal interest collide with your duty as a fiduciary. It didn't matter that he thought it was a good deal. It didn't even matter whether the company lost money. It's about the hidden conflict. I did not disclose. That was enough. And that's still an awful lot of money. Well, it's millions today that he had to pay back. And there's another judgment I didn't put in here, and I will send it to you as well. It's a more modern one, almost 80 years later, in 2004, Philip versus Fieldstone. So, and then you're going to ask myself, yes, but there's now new case law overriding this principle. No, there's not. And the Supreme Court of Appeal in that very Phillips matter of 2004 only confirmed exactly what it said in Mr. Robinson's case. And that this is alive and it's binding to us as fiduciaries, as trustees and directors in our community scheme. Make it known your interest and don't vote on your interest. Very important judgment, very interesting to read. I'll send it together with the presentation as well of the Phillips versus Fieldstone matter in 2004 before the Supreme Court of Appeal. So what does Section 8 say? And I'm going to read it to you verbatim. A trustee stands in a fiduciary relationship to the body corporate, must not receive any direct or indirect personal economic benefit. And you say, aha, Jolene, this is where you got it wrong now. He's not allowed to contract, or she's not allowed to contract with the body corporate. And it stands there black and white. Ladies and gentlemen, this talks about any interest that's not been declared, and it goes more so with bribes, brown envelopes that I'm taking as a trustee and nobody knows about it. In the moment you become aware of any material interest in a contract, you must disclose it. And then the recusal part. This is prescribed management rule 6 subsection 3 tells us, Jolene, you must recuse yourself if you are a trustee and the body corporate or the homeowners or the body corporate wants to do business with your company. You are not allowed to be present at that meeting when they vote for your specific company, and you can also not vote for that specific company. Not even if all the members say, okay, but we now unanimously decided that that's okay. You can't excuse bad faith. Please keep that in mind. Very, very important. It's the same with the Homeowners Association. If it's a non-profit company, let's look at what the Companies Act say. And it's just a different section and a different act. Section 75, personal financial interest. You have a personal financial interest, you do 3 things. You disclose it, you recuse yourself, and you do not vote. What does Section 76 tell us? There's standards of conduct. Act in good faith, the same as the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act. Proper purpose in the best interest of that HOA. Apply your own independent mind, exercise care and skill, and never use your office or the information that comes with it for your personal gain. If you want to do business with the body corporate or the Homeowners Association, the safeguard is full disclosure to your fellow board members, your fellow trustees. Very, very important. You cannot vote. Step aside. Log off of that meeting. Get out of the room. And then 77.7 is about liability, that very breach of our fiduciary duty. And I want to pause here. And this is a matter, and that is what we need to get right. The CSOS, and I've said this over and over again, the CSOS has got, by their own annual returns, or their annual report, annually, they got last year over 30,000 disputes. Stop lodging CSOS disputes that's not in their mandate. If you want to say, Jolene, pay back the money as the trustee because you acted in bad faith, you didn't disclose your company and you voted for your own company, you cannot go to the CSOS. There was a matter in the appeal court, in the High Court, apologies, to just get to this. It's called Jan Christian Ellis was the applicant versus the trustees of Palm Grove Body Corporate. It was heard in 2021, where Mr. Ellis was found to be liable by the CSOS adjudicator. He was a trustee that he had to pay back, I think, 177,000 Rand back into the coffers of the body corporate regarding a contract. He took out the CCTV contract on behalf of the body corporate when he was a trustee. And the CSOS ordered him to pay it back because the body corporate suffered damages of 176,000 Rand or so. And he took it on appeal. But he says the CSOS can't make such an order, and the High Court judge agreed with him and said it can't fall within Section 39(1) of the CSOS Act, a financial contribution or any other amount to be paid back. It does not extend to damages. You cannot take a breach of fiduciary duty if you want the money to be paid back. Obviously, what would be the exercise of it not? To the CSOS, you must take it then to the courts. That would also alleviate the CSOS's role if you only take matters to the CSOS that falls within their mandate. Yes, we know CSOS sometimes doesn't screen these matters at the onset. They should, and reject it right there and then, not a couple of years later. So please make sure that the CSOS, it's in their mandate for it to be taken to the CSOS. And this is a perfect example. The CSOS does not have jurisdiction over damages claims. In fact, there was 5 subsequent adjudication orders to that effect that refers back to this very Ellis case and say we do not have jurisdiction to award money owing to a body corporate by a trustee or so. Please keep that in mind. So, common law, of course, applies. Fiduciary duty, Robertson, powerful judgment, 1921. And then, of course, risk of a delinquent director declaration, always good to have that. And members ratification, we can't ratify it and say, okay, now we fixed it. Let's move on. Yes, one can contract with the body corporate or the homeowners association. The law does not ban this conflict, ladies and gentlemen. It bans the secrecy and the voting. I'm voting for my own company. If a contract is disclosed, fairly priced and independently approved by your fellow board members, it is perfectly lawful. Same with the example I gave of the garden service, but I like to call it go through the front door. Don't go through the alley or the side or the back door. Declare, go through the front door. You'll be perfectly fine against any attacks towards you in the High Court to say, oh, Jolene took the money. Jolene, company is benefiting. But I didn't vote for it. Mine was one of many companies and my fellow board members decided on it. If everything is above board, that's okay then. So look at this. 6 steps. Disclose, recuse, market test. Nobody said you have to take the cheapest quote in South Africa. I think let me just pause here. Let's get 3 quotes. Company A is 50 Rand. Company B is 2,000 Rand. And company 3 is 2,500. Right? We automatically go with the cheapest quote because we need to take the cheapest quote. There's no such thing that you have to take the cheapest quote. Test it against what is the services that you are paying for? What can they offer? Are they a reputable company? Start phoning around before you get these service providers. Make calls. I always ask for references. Give me 5 references. I phone them. Put it in writing for me. I check if the company's registered. Is it a fly-by-night? Do your due diligence. Don't be conflicted and say, board members, you better get my company in or else there's problems. You must step aside. It must be documented. It must be minuted. There must be a trial. Directors or trustees resolution. Why are we not doing these things in our community scheme? If you do not do this now, we'll see you in the High Court later, hundreds of thousands of rands later. An account and review, very, very important. Don't say it just a matter of fact. Oh, yes, I know, but yes, this is actually also my company. I'm so sorry. Yes. No, declare it. It's very important. But how direct, I always get asked the question, must this interest be, Jolene? And my answer is always, it doesn't matter. However remote, however indirect, if there's an interest, declare it. Here's what I think in the simplest way to think about it. The cost of over-disclosing is nothing. I say, I've got a stake in this company, I'm a shareholder. You disclose it. The cost of undisclosing, that's personal liability. That's a court case. That's a high court matter. So what are you going to do? Always think about the fact that you are going to spend money if you keep quiet about this secret of yours. Obviously, many people keep it a secret because they want to make a benefit of it. They want to control that their fellow trustees and directors ensure that they use only this company. It's flawed, and we're all liable in our personal capacities and our fiduciary duties as board members, as trustees and directors. Conflict of interest, ladies and gentlemen, and I've highlighted there, is not a crime. Hiding it is. If you didn't tell them about your law firm or your garden service or your auditing firm, this is a breach, full stop. That's it. And then you vote for it as well. Then we go back to that very rule. If it's a body corporate, section 6.3 says, but you can't vote for it. And at the end of the day, who loses? Everybody. And you're making a secret profit. And then you're putting yourself first. The very thing that the Act says against, you must put the body corporate and the interest of the members first when you step up to be a trustee or director. There's always a price. Personal liability, liability for the loss, getting the money back. You removed from office. Yeah, and our homeowners association declared a delinquent. And now let's pause and talk about our insurance policy. Yes, Jolene, but that's okay. I understand, but we got the Fidelity insurance. Yes, very happy for you that you got Fidelity insurance. That is excellent. Fidelity insurance doesn't cover you about for trustees running a benefit through their own company and for their own pockets, about theft of loss of monies. It's not about if the trustees are having a direct interest in pocketing the profits and he never or she never declared it. That's not what that insurance policy is going to cover you for. So please keep that in mind. And I'll also put a few questions and answers as well in that I've drafted specifically for the session, and I'll add it in for you later on or afterwards. And just please comment as well with your questions. So this is what keeps me up at night, is when I hear about these matters and we confront the trustees or the directors and they say, well, everybody knew about it. I say, thank you. Can you declare it? Can we have the minutes? Can we have the resolution? No, we have no such thing. And then it's sad to say, but then the board turns against one another. The trustees turn against one another. And there's all these secrecies hiding out, and there's hundreds of thousands that have gone to a specific individual over the past few years. And who loses at the end of the day? Every member in that community scheme. Because now you're going to think about legal costs. We're going to go to court with this matter. It's bad for your reputation as a trustee or director. It's bad for business. Remember, a scheme is a business. We pay our levies. We expect our trustees and director to not waste our money, to work accordingly to a strict budget, that very budget that we approved at the AGM that you go to every year. And this is what we like saying. Yes, we'll just pass a resolution. We'll approve it afterwards. That is not a problem, Jolene. But you cannot ratify what you never honestly had in the first place and what you told people. Never, we can't approve dishonesty, can we? Can we say that is okay? You acted in bad faith, that's okay. And any approvals in any event only counts if it rests on full honest disclosure. A conflict that was concealed when the decision was made cannot be cured by a vote after the fact. In fact, it's worse. A board that knowingly rubber stamps a hidden conflict just pulls everyone else into the liability with them. Please keep that in mind. And later on, we're going to talk about another deadly sin, and that's when the developer, and when is it a conflict of interest with the developer? You know, we always have that as well. Trustees and directors doing business with the community scheme through their businesses, and then, of course, the developer. So what are we saying? Doing it through the front door. Keep your scheme out of trouble and out of the courts. Go through the front door. Look at these 6 things I have in place here. And you can do it now or you can leave it and we can see you in court. It is your decision, ladies and gentlemen. An annual written declaration of interest from every executive. Apologies, I skipped the first one. A standing register of all trustees and directors' interests. How big can this databases be? 10 pages. A conflict of interest policy written into the scheme rules. It can be 4 or 5 paragraphs. Nobody said it needs to be 10 pages. A standing recusal protocol for every conflicted decision. Competitive quotes or a tender policy, how to do it. Independent approval from the fellow board members and sign off. Capture it in the minutes and a signed resolution by at least 2 scheme executives. This is what you need to do. Then you are protected. Before any decision touching a trustee's interest, ask, is this the best interest of the community scheme as a whole, including current and future members? If you cannot answer yes in writing, recuse. Let's say, for instance, Jolene is an attorney. Jolene's got a law firm. But now Jolene decided Jolene wants to have a garden service. So I'm telling my body corporate, I have a garden service now. Yes, but Jolene, is this your speciality? Can you know what to do? No, I'll learn it on the job. Don't worry about it. I got it. How difficult can it be to mow a lawn of a 300 unit body corporate? Yes, I know I'll get some people to help me with it. Don't worry. Are you really going to feel comfortable with Jolene's garden service now? I don't really know how to do a garden service, but I'm awfully cheap and I only ask 2,000 Rand a month. Now, do your due diligence. Is this the best? Is this the best individual for your community scheme? I would most definitely not want to appoint me as a garden service because I don't even know the first thing about gardening. So don't let your fellow trustees and directors bully you in using a company of them that there's no expertise in, or they think they're going to do it. Nobody says you can't do business with them, but also do your due diligence. Jolene is going to give you more headaches in your community scheme if I now mow the lawn and turn the beddings, etc. Because I think it's quite hard work gardening as well. You know, it's just an example I'm giving. I don't have a garden service, but you know, you get the idea. So it's about our conflict and our mindset here. Let's look at it through the amateur lens. It's embarrassing. We're hiding it. We're not saying anything and we're pocketing money every month. Huge disclosure that we didn't do. And we're getting a financial benefit and everybody's losing except us. No, wouldn't recommend. Completely against the laws I just mentioned. Please do not do it. You can have a dual role, declare. If I can leave you with something, it is declare. That's one thing you should do. Now let's look at the legal framework. Statutory inception. Apologies, I'm going ahead of myself. We are done now with the conflict of interest between a director and a trustee. And apologies, let me just recap what we just disclose the interest, ladies and gentlemen, in writing. Gone are the days verbal, in writing, an email. Yes, we all have these WhatsApp groups. You can put it there as well, but declare it. Before that decision is made by your fellow board members, you stand up from that meeting, you exit the Teams or the Zoom or the Google Meet, or you exit the room. You are not present. You're not going to vote on it. Look at your fellow trustees is going to look at the price, what the services offer is. Otherwise, it is a huge problem. And then only if your fellow board members or trustees have decided on it, what are you going to do? Step away and go have a beer or a braai afterwards? No, you're going to minute it and you're going to sign the resolution. And then if that is done, then it is above board if all these steps have been followed. Now we move on to another question. But Jolene, the developers controlling everything in this community scheme that I bought off plan or I bought from, and it is illegal. It is unconstitutional. You must take them on. Someone contacted me the other day and said, Jolene, we have a claim against the developer. I think it was 15 million or 27 million. Yes, I know I'm not good with figures, but it was millions. You must take them on immediately. And I said, yes, but I can make money out of this. Now I'm thinking, my fees are going to be lacquer. But, I know for my sins, I'm honest. And I said, but hang on. You say that the developer owes you this much money. Can you prove it? Yes, Jolene. I say, what documents you got? No, we suspect it. I know we can. So let's just take it to court and we'll gather evidence along the way. I said, sorry, I'm not touching it. Go try the attorney next door. And not at VDM, because we're not touching a matter like that. Not because we not go against developers. In fact, we only follow the law. Is it back the fact that I'm going to waste your money? Because first we need to do our due diligence. So I asked them, do you have this? Do you have that? No, we don't have that, but that's not relevant. And no. So we must be very careful when we say there's a conflict of interest with our developer and the developer stealing the money. We must prove it. So this happens in almost every new development that I come across that I work with. And that's very important for us here at VDM to work with developers when they first have that idea in their mind to say, Jolene, I'm building this layered or mixed use development, and this is my vision. That we come in there to ensure that the correct governance documents are in place, not to protect the developer, but to protect you from buying into that scheme. Now, remember, the conveyancer is not going to draft these documents comprehensively. It sometimes is a copy and paste exercise from another scheme. Each development's rules, the memorandum of incorporation or the constitution, the architectural guidelines, and then, of course, the rules must be bespoke to that development at the end of the day. And that's to protect the community scheme, each and every owner and the developer. We're not drafting documents if it's unconstitutional. And that's where a lot of developers are missing the mark in South Africa due to the fact that, many of the interests are not disclosed. The documents are drafted substandardly. It's vague. It's embarrassing. It doesn't make any sense just because they want to save a few rands on getting these documents drafted correctly from the onset. So, what do we hear from the members? The developer has a permanent conflict of interest. Look at his voting power, Jolene. It can't be legal. He's got all the votes almost. Here's a legal reality, ladies and gentlemen. The developer has got a dual role. He is the creator of that scheme, and he's the temporary controller. That is his right. Please make the distinction because it's crucial. An inherent conflict of interest is legal and inspected. Of course, he's the majority shareholder, the developer, he or she. It only becomes unlawful when it turns into a conflict of duty or an outright abuse of power. And I'm going to say exactly when it is. I'm going to give you examples. And this is the line in the sand. Okay, until units are registered and transferred, the developer is still the legal owner. Would you agree with me? They carry real financial and legal exposure until the very last phase is built it and hand over. The dominant voting power through participation quota, of course, in a body, corporate or developer votes in a homeowners association exists to protect the master plan from being derailed halfway through. It's legal. So when a developer uses this majority to finish construction, secure the estate, or stop a structural change that would wreck the development, they are still building. That is a protected right. So when is it not? When a developer builds in phases and he uses phases 1's levies to build the entire scheme and he doesn't put a cent in. Now, who then benefits? Only the developer, not us boughting into the scheme, wouldn't you agree? So this is the question that you should ask yourself. Moving from this very commercial interest to the breach of duty. Now, let's look if it's a company, a non-profit company, and the developer decided to do a non-profit company with a memorandum of association. Majority votes cannot be used in a way that oppresses or unfairly prejudicial to ordinary members. You can't vote to unjustifying enriching yourself as a developer, ladies and gentlemen, at the member's expense. Just to say, oh yes, I've got the interest, and just casually saying it without proper accusal is a problem. It's a problem, and there's case law regarding that. It's not, and I will give it to you in the next one where I've given some examples. It's not unconstitutional in a memorandum or their founding documents like a memorandum of incorporation or a constitution for the developer to say a certain class of levies of his is exempt, and he doesn't need to pay levies. That must be tested in a court of law. So that in itself is not unfair. But when there is shortfalls, which I'm going to give you an exact example for, let me go to that slide. And there's a shortfall, and I weaponize it as a developer to say that, I'm blocking certain things, and I'm using it for my own benefit because I'm building phases 2 to 30 with all the money, but I'm not paying any levies and I'm not paying any actual expenses. Now, then you are enriching yourself, and then it is an abuse of your power. So in itself, if your memorandum, if there's a developer stronghold still in your community scheme, and it says that the developer is exempted in your homeowners association from paying levies, that in itself is not, that in itself, yes, it can be tested in a court of law, but that not itself makes it illegal. Please be very clear about that. Same with contracting. Now, of course, the developer is the majority shareholder, and he is going to appoint service providers, and he's going to appoint, for instance, the managing agent, to assist them with this new development. But forcing those long-term contracts on the HOA or the body corporate and say, yes, but it's actually my sister company. We've seen developers, then they've got 6 or 7 sister companies, and it's not been disclosed. The one is doing the security, the one is doing that, and it's one's doing that. Just declare it for us as members at the end of the day. And so be very, very careful. And you're entitled to ask for these documents. What about phase changes? Executing a pre-approved phase master plan clearly defined in the founding documents, and then changing that very nature of the common areas or the exclusive use areas and the spaces in the registered plan. Now, that's the abuse of power. So I'm all about preventative governance. That is what I advocate in South Africa for community schemes. That is the risk assessment toolkit I've developed. This is what I'm doing my doctorate about, is that we can just deal with our body corporates and homeowners association and just run it a little bit better in South Africa. So what is the way forward for members and developers and everybody in the community schemes? We move from speculative speculation to accountable administration. That is what we must do. Paperwork over assumptions. How many of you have got minutes of your meetings as trustees and directors that got resolutions to give effect to those decisions we take? That you have not voted for it if you have a company doing business with the body corporate or the homeowners association? That your governance documents are well drafted. Your memorandum of incorporation, your constitution, your conduct rules, your architectural guideline. If your sectional title development, I've been saying it time and time again, I just don't know when the CSOS is going to implement it, but they will. They are going to fine you. Your conduct rules in a body corporate must be submitted to the CSOS. And in any event, we all know, and I am so pleased about that, in fact, because that it protects everyone. If you build a new development now, and there's a sectional title element to it, of course, it must be registered with the CSOS, and your rules must be approved at the CSOS before the deeds office, before the conveyancer can go even open that sectional title register in the deeds office. It's actually getting all the old schemes to comply. And I think it's about 20% or less, 20% or so of body corporates in South Africa, if I look at the CSOS's annual report, that's actually registered with the CSOS. So you can't fine a member if your rules are not registered with the CSOS as a sectional title scheme. I say this time and time again, but the majority of rules in this country are not registered with the CSOS, and then you're only stuck in yourself because you can't find Jolene if she's doing something terribly to transgress the conduct rules in the community schemes. So CSOS won't entertain a fishing expedition or a vague sense of grievance. Well, we hope they won't, and they can't. You need action, actual quantified irregularities. Remember my developer example I gave you? They want to take the developer to court, but they couldn't prove it. And everything, in fact, looked above board for me when I looked at the financials. Minutes. Recuse yourself. It's very, very important. So the bottom line, if we're dealing with a developer, where the developer is still the majority shareholder in the community scheme, and the phases are being built, declare your interest. Don't make unlawful decisions as a developer. Do not build your phases by using only the levy, the money that the members are paying at the end of the day. That is wrong. The same with the garden service, like if you're a trustee or a director and you want to contract with the scheme. I mean, many of the court cases we often see, and I report on them 3 times a week or so, that SAFLI brings out. It's there's even a constitutional judgment that came out in February. I know February is a long time ago, about a retirement scheme and what happened there. We don't get a lot of constitutional judgments, so that was very interesting. The Supreme Court of Appeal, the High Court gives feedback, and many of these things are poor governance in your community scheme. So please, it's very, very important that you go look at your governance documents. Go look at which directors or trustees are doing business with your community scheme. If you are a business owner and you're also a trustee and a director in your community scheme, please make a register. In fact, everybody must have that register to say, this is my name, this is my company. Yes, I provide this service to the body corporate or the homeowners association, and this is my interest. This is the minutes reflecting that I have declared it. This is the minutes where I've not voted for it, and well, not you, your fellow trustees have voted for it, and there's a resolution to appoint the specific service provider. I think it's very, very important that we understand that at the end of the day, because if we don't, nothing is left for us at the end of the day if we cannot be honest with ourselves. And that's what I'm always saying, ladies and gentlemen. You're doing business with your body corporate is fine, with your homeowners association. Declare it and run away. That's the only time I'll tell you to run away. Do not vote for it. So declare, recuse, and then you will be set. Please do that register as well, because we've seen that court case of 1921. It will still hold you liable. Very, very important, and declare it to the members. The one thing we do as directors and trustees, we make decisions, and I like a monthly newsletter. I like a monthly update, or if there's something urgent, we email the owners and say, this is what we are doing. This is the problem. This is what we are doing. This is what it's costing. It's within budget. It's not your job for everybody to read what you do as a trustee or director, but I prefer an information overload as opposed to not saying the necessary. Overload the owners once a month with information. How many times? Yeah, but Jolene, we can't talk to our trustees or directors. We don't even know who they are. They're not available. That thing must stop. You have been appointed. Yes, we know you're doing it free of charge, but you have a fiduciary, and you please need to ensure and that you execute it. And first and foremost, you're a member. Aren't we all protecting our movable property at the end of the day? Aren't we protecting our rights in that community scheme if we want to sell it one day? How are we going to sell it for a reasonable price one day if there's no maintenance? If 1 or 2 trustees are pocketing the money, they've not declared their interest. But I want to go back to this point before I close off. And I think it's very, 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 very important. Let's go back to that fidelity and trustee liability cover, the insurance cover. I often get this question. Yes, Jolene, we know this trustee or that trustee didn't declare their interest, but we're not worried because we got fidelity and trustee liability insurance cover. That fidelity insurance covers theft of the scheme's money. It isn't designed for a trustee's secret profit liability. I've said this before. And trustees' liability cover typically excludes exactly the conduct we've been describing in this webinar today. Dishonesty, bad faith, and then personal gain on top of that. So the very breach that bites us is usually the one the policy won't pay, the insurance policy. Please read your wording. Never treat that very insurance policy as a substitute for the front door. So if I can leave you with that today, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I always finish ahead of time because I know you are busy and I know you've taken time out of your busy day to come and join this webinar of ours. here today. That is my telephone number. Don't phone me now. The phone is off. That's my email address. And these are the actual individuals working in the departments: Jacqueline, Erin, Denise, me, JD, and Zanele. So this is what I've got for you today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to put on my... Oh, no, I saw my put off my own sound as well. Told you I'm not good with figures or a computer. Can you see me now? Here I am. So if I can implore on you today, I'm going to send you the presentation. I'm going to collate your questions and answers in it. I'm going to collate it. We're going to send it to you. I'm going to send you those 2 case laws. So I'm leaving you with this. But if you joined late, another thing I want to tell you, to not frustrate yourself. And I've said this, and I like repeating myself because I've got teenagers. I have to repeat myself 10,000 times a day in any event. Do not lodge CSOS or court case or CSOS matters that the CSOS does not have jurisdiction over. The CSOS might not reject it at the onset, and then 3 years later, you're waiting for the outcome. Then you say, Jolene, but the CSOS has dismissed it. You must do your due diligence to see whether it's in Section 39 of the CSOS Act. And if you say Jolene is a trustee, and Jolene didn't declare a business to the trustee, and you asking Jolene to pay back the money, the CSOS can't tell me to pay back the money as a trustee. Only a court of law can tell me to pay back the money. And do not look at Section 39(1) of the CSOS Act. It says any amount or contribution to be repaid. Damages claims are not in there. There's a high court matter for that effect, and it's in each and every CSOS adjudication order afterwards that we can't ask Jolene, the trustee, to pay back the money at the CSOS. So please keep that in mind. And I will send you that court case as well, the Ellis court case regarding the payback the money of the fiduciary breach that allegedly happened. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much. I only do topics that you want to let me do about. So what's our next topic? Tell me. What's our next topic? Put it in the chat. I don't know why my camera is doing this now. It's probably tired of me. Tell me what I must talk about next. Tell me and we'll talk about it. I want to talk about what you want to talk about, except it must be community scheme, because that's all I know is a community scheme. I don't know criminal law or anything. Now I don't know what's happening with my camera now. So ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much. Keep on with your questions. Keep on with your comments. We do what you want to hear. And remember, we also have live training here at our cinema room at VDM Attorneys. Follow us on social media. I only talk about community schemes in any event. Read all my stuff in the newspaper and online. You don't have to go buy the physical newspaper. If you're lazy, you can buy online or you can read online. I thank you very much. And yes, let me try and switch on my camera again. You know, I don't have a very good computer. So, no, it's just not working now. It's probably at the very end. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. Just put your comments in writing, your questions. It's easier for me to answer. Remember, I'll do question, answer, and the type of letters and the legislation or the case law going with it. I thank you very, very much and have a fabulous Friday. And until we meet again, thank you and goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.